Hello guys, this is part 56 of SQL Server. In this session, we will discuss about handling errors in SQL Server 2005 and later version. Before continuing with this session, I strongly recommend to watch part 18 and 55 of this video series. With the introduction of try-catch blocks in SQL Server 2005, error handling in SQL Server is now very much similar to programming languages like C# and Java. In SQL Server 2000, to handle errors, we use @error system, @error system function. In fact, we have seen in part 55 of this video series how to handle errors using @error system function. If you have not watched that part, I would strongly encourage you to do so before continuing with this session. In SQL Server 2005 and later, we can make use of this try-catch block construct to handle errors. In fact, handling errors with try-catch construct is much easier than handling errors with @error system function. Today for this demo, we will be making use of TBL product and TBL product sales tables. The same tables that we have worked with in part 55 of this video series. TBL product table is like an inventory. Table which contains the names of the product and their respective unit price and the quantity available in the stock. Product ID is the primary key for this table, and TBL product sales table contains information about products that we sold. So if you look at the columns, product sales ID is the primary key, product ID is the ID of product that we have sold, and quantity sold is obviously the quantity that we sold. So whenever we sell a product, there are two things that should happen. First, we should detect the quantity that we are selling from TBL products table. Next, we should record the transaction in TBL product sales table. Let's understand this with an example. Now at the moment there are 50 desktops. Available. Now let us say I want to sell 5 desktop. So first thing we have to do is we have to detect from 50 the 5 desktops. So we should update the quantity. We should update the quantity available column in TBL products table. Next, we need to insert a new row into TBL product sales table. The product ID that we are selling is number 2. The product ID that we are selling is number 2 because that is the desktop. So number 2, and the quantity sold is 5. And the quantity sold is 5. So in brief, whenever we make a transaction, whenever we sell a product, it should first update TBL product table and insert a new row into TBL product sales table. Now let's look at a stored procedure. Now let's look at, say, stored procedure which is capable of doing that. Now this is essentially the same stored procedure that we have worked with in part 55 of this video series. We have a procedure called SP sell product, stored procedure that called SP sell product, which takes 2 parameters, product ID and quantity to sell. Product ID and quantity to sell, both of them of type integer. The first thing this stored procedure should do is to check the stock available. To check the stock available for the product that we want to sell. Now let's say here we have the stock available variable. We have the stock available variable of type integer. Into this variable we are loading quantity. We are loading quantity that is available for the product. For the product that we want to sell. Select a stock available is equal to quantity available from TBL products table, where product ID is equal to whatever is the product ID, that we are passing into this stored procedure. Now the next important thing is to check, okay, if the stock available is less than quantity, if stock available is less than quantity that we want to sell, then we are in the problem. We cannot continue with that transaction. So we have to throw an error. Back to the calling application, stating that there is no enough stock available, and that is what we are doing, and the way we are doing it is by using raise error function. So this raise error function basically takes three parameters. This raise error functions basically takes three parameters. The first parameter is the error message. The first parameter is the error message. The second parameter is error severity. In most cases, when we want to create and return custom errors, we use a severity level of 16, which indicates that these are journal, which indicates that these are journal errors that can be corrected by the end user. And the final parameter is error state, which is the number between 1 and 255. Raise error only generates errors with state from 1 through 127. In our example for the error state, we are using a value of 1. We are using a value of 1. Okay. On the other hand, if there is enough stock available, become into the else block. Become into the else block. And within the else block, the first thing that we want to do is to update TBL product set quantity available is equal to whatever is the quantity available. From that, subtract the quantity that we are selling. And this is nothing but the parameter that we are passing in. Whatever is the quantity that we want to sell, where product ID is equal to at product ID. So obviously you will have to reduce that quantity. For the product, for the at product ID for the product. So obviously you will have to reduce that quantity for that product. That we are selling. How do we know which is the product that we are selling? We are passing in the product ID. We are passing in the product ID into this stored procedure. And that is what we are using here. This is the stored procedure. This is the stored procedure. And that is what we are using here in the where clause. And then the next important thing to come. So we have done half of the work. We have updated this TBL product table. The next thing is to insert a row into this TBL product sales table. Obviously, to insert a row into this table, we need values for 3 columns: product ID, product sales ID, product ID, and quantity sold. Product ID and quantity sold are coming into the procedure as parameter. So there is no problem in retrieving those values. But product sales ID is the primary key column, and it is not identity column. So we will have to supply a value for that manually, and to do that first we have to figure out what is the maximum value that is present. What is the maximum value that is present? Because if you try to insert another second row, two row into this table, you will get an error. You will get a primary key violation error. So we first need to calculate the maximum of the product sales ID, and then to that we need to add 1. And that is what we are doing here. And that is what we are doing here. If you look at the code, that we have here, it is slightly complex than what we have just discussed. We are saying, okay, select at max product sales ID. Now the reason why we are using case statement here is because of a situation where if there are no rows at all in TBL product sales table, if this table, if this table is empty, max of product sales ID will return null. Max of product sales ID will return null. So when max of product sales ID is returning null, when max of product sales ID is null, then we want to return 0. Instead of null, because for a null, if you add 1, it will still be null. That is why when max of product sales ID is null, then return 0, else return max of product sales ID and then to that add 1, and to that add 1, and then to that add 1. And to that add 1. Okay. That way we are computing the value for the primary key column, and then finally insert those, and then finally insert those values into TBL sales, into TBL product sales table. Insert into TBL product sales values, the values for 3 columns, That's it. So let's create this procedure. Now, and if you look at the more thing, so let's create this stored procedure. Now, and if you look at one more thing, all these statements, updating TBL products table, inserting into TBL sales product, table, both of these statements are wrapped inside begin transaction, are wrapped between begin transaction and commit transaction statements, which means our intention is to basically treat them as a single unit of work. Either both of them should succeed, or even if one of them fails, then we want to fail the other one and roll back the transaction. That is our intention. But then here this may not work. As expected. But first let's see it in working action. Now if you look at the data, so let's look at the let's see it in working action. Now if you look at the data that we have in TBL product table, there are 50 desktops and 70 laptops available, and let's say we want to sell, and let's say we want to sell 10 desktops. 10 desktops, and to do that, this stored procedure sp sell product, we need to pass in values for two parameters: product id. The product id is 2. The product id is 2, and the quantity that I want to sell is 10. So let's execute this stored procedure and see what is going to happen. So let's execute this stored procedure and let's see what is going to happen. So one row affected. Now let's see. Now let's see. So as expected, desktops quantity available is 40, and there is a row, inserted into TBL product sales table. Now let's try to manually insert an error into this stored procedure. And the way we can do it is simply comment this line. Comment this line. So the place where we are actually incrementing the primary key value by 1, we are commenting that line. So obviously what is going to happen? Now we will get a primary key violation. So let's try to sell 10 more. So let's try to try to sell 10 more desktop and see what happens. So before we do that, let's look at okay. There are 40 desktops available. So I can happily sell 10 desktops. So let's see what happens when we press F5. Let's see. Press F5. We have not altered this stored procedure. That is why it sold those 10 desktops. Means we will have now 30 desktop. Okay, and a row inserted. Now we only change it here. Now Now we only changed it changed it here, but we have not really altered the procedure. But we have not really altered the procedure. So let's alter the procedure. Okay, so there are 30 desktop available. So there are 30 desktop available. Now let's sell 10 more. Now let's say sell 10 more and see what is going to happen. And see what is going to happen. Now we should get that primary key violation error. Look at this, it says one row affected. So we have the error. Look at this, it says one row affected. Here you can see one row affected, which means from the 30, which means from the 30 desktop that are available, it detects 10, but it did not insert a row in TBL product sales table. So which is like inconsistent. So to detect the errors and then to roll back the transaction, in the previous session, we have seen how to use @error system function. In this session, we will see how to do the same thing. Using try catch block. Using try catch block. Which is much easier compared with the using @error. So if you look at this, it is exactly the same procedure. So if you look at this, it is exactly the same procedure. All we are doing here is, the update TBL product statement update TBL product statement, and calculating of the primary key values, and calculating of the primary key values, and inserting into TBL product sales table. All these codes is now wrapped inside a begin try and an try block. So when these statements are being executed, if at all, if there is any error situation, what is going to happen? The control will immediately jump to the catch block. The control will be jump to the catch block. Okay. So when these statements are being executed, if at all, if there is any error situations, what is going to happen? The control will immediately jump to the catch block. And then if you look at in the catch block, what we are saying, the first statement is to roll back the transaction. So we are rolling the transaction back. So which means even if this statement has executed successfully, that will also be rolled back. Okay. And then there is some functions. There is some function here which we will talk about in a bit. And on the other hand, let's say there are no errors. Everything is working fine as expected. Let's say there are no errors, then what is going to happen? We finally committing the transaction. We are finally committing the transaction, which means the changes will be made permanent in the database. So it is so easy to use the try catch block to detect and handle errors. Okay. So let's alter this procedure. This procedure. Command completed successfully. So we have successfully altered this stored procedure. And another thing to keep in mind is these functions. Another thing to keep in mind is these functions now look at this. If there is an exception within the statement, within the statements, now look at this. If there is an exception within the statements here, what you can see that are wrapped inside begin try and an and try block. If at all there is an exception here, what happens? The control immediately jump back to the catch block. The first statement in the catch block, gets executed. The first statement in the catch block, gets executed, and the rest of them, So whenever there is an error condition, we want to find out what is the error number. We want to find out what is the error number, error message, the procedure where the error has occurred, state of the error, the severity number, and the line number. And to do that, we have several built-in SQL Server functions which gives information about those errors. And the names are very meaningful. Error number returns the number of the error. Error message returns the message of the error, and so forth and so on. Okay, now remember, these functions will have that error information only within the context of the catch block. Only within the context of the catch block. If you try to execute them outside the context of the catch block, they return null. Now let's select them. Let's execute them. Now let's say select them. Let's execute them. In isolation, I am just selecting them and executing. Look at this when I execute them. Look at this when I execute them. Everything is null. Everything is null. Okay. So only when there is an error and when this statement when this statement is being executed within the context of the catch block, we will get the error information from those functions. Okay. So these are three functions. So those are these are those functions. So these are those functions, and this is the basic syntax for the try catch block. Any set of SQL statement that are wrapped between begin, try, and try. You know, whenever those statements are executed, if at all, if there is any exception, the control will immediately go to the catch block. On the other hand, if there is no exception, the control will go to the statement after the catch block. And remember, and remember, errors that are trapped, errors that are trapped by a catch block are not returned to the calling application. So if any part of the error information must be returned to the application, the code in the catch block must do so by using raise error function. In the scope of the catch block, in the scope of the catch block, there are several system functions. There are several system functions. These are the functions. That are used to retrieve more information about the error that has occurred. These functions return null if they are executed outside the scope of the catch block. And we have seen that and try catch block cannot be used in a user defined functions. All right, try catch block cannot be used in a user defined function. All right, so now let's quickly execute this stored procedure. And see what is going to happen. So what is there? What is there? At the moment we have 70 laptops. So let's go ahead and sell 10 laptops. Let's go ahead and sell 10 laptops. So I am selling 10 laptops. So at the moment everything should work fine. So at the moment everything should work fine. Because if you look at the stored procedure, you know we have not commented this line. If you look at this stored procedure, we have not commented this line which would generate that primary key violation error. So it should work. So let's copy that. Let's execute the stored procedure. So one row affected. So we have copied that and pasted it here and execute it. So one row affected. And you should see, so quantity available is, and you should see the quantity available for laptop is going to be 60. Look at here. And there are 10 laptops sold. And there are 10 laptops sold. There is an inserted rows in the TVL sales product table. So which is what we expected. Now let's go ahead and comment this line. Now let's go ahead and commented this line. So that we get a primary key violation error. Let's alter this procedure before executing that. So alter this stored procedure before we executed that. Now let's try to sell desktops. Let's see how many desktops we have in the inventory. Now let's see how many laptops we have in inventory. We have 20 desktops. We have 20 desktops. Let's try to sell 5 of them. So I want to sell 5 desktops. So I want to sell 5 desktops. And desktop product ID is 2. And now we are expecting a primary key violation to occur, and then the transaction should be rolled back. So execute at this now. So execute at this. So execute this. Look at this. Now the primary key violation occurred. But then since we trapped that inside a catch block, we have trapped that inside a catch block. We don't have the error information shown in the output. and then we are rolled back the transaction, and then we are rolled back the transaction. And if you look at the output, in the catch block, we are saying select the error number. We are saying select the error number, error message. Look at this, it clearly say what is the error message. What is the error message? What is the error message? Violation of primary key constraint. Violation of primary key constraint. And then which is the procedure that causes the error? SP cell product is the name of the procedure. And then error state, error severity, and then error line. At which line in the procedure did the error occur? Line number 33. Line number 34. So to find out which line is that, press Ctrl G. Press Ctrl G and then type in the line number. It will take you to the line number and your cursor will be blinking there. Here the cursor is blinking. Okay, so if it is not clear, and this is the line which causes, and this is the line, and this is the line which causes that. If this is not clear, another way to show the line number is go to tools options. Go to tool options and in text editor, select Transact-SQL journal, and select line number, click OK. It should show line numbers. So line numbers are already there. So if you look at the line number, it is saying error line is 34. For some reason, it is showing the line number as this. So some reason it is showing the line number as this one. In fact, it should be this one. Let's execute this once again and see. And see what is going to happen. Okay. Okay. Maybe we have these lines here. Maybe we have these lines here. That is why we have these on the top. That is why the line numbers are not correct. That is why the line number are not correct. So let's press Ctrl G So let's press Ctrl G and type in 34. Now it should go to that insert statement. Type 34 and now it should go to that insert statement. Okay. Insert into TBL product sales. Okay. That's it for today. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.